So, the prayer. Master of all worlds, highest
power,
merciful parent,
compassion.
in your presence,
Eternal One, source of strength for us,
as you have been,
we
very
humbly acknowledge you.
What are we?
What are we?
What is our life?
Life that you have such great kindness to us.
Therefore,
we appeal before you, so that you may
all
failing.
that are full
Never become barriers between us and you. And may it prepare our hearts to feel all of you. May you listen to these words of ours. May you open our hearts to the mysteries of your Torah.
this,
how it study be a source of before your throne of glory, like sweet incense.
you shower
upon us the light of our soul's source in all ways by which we find ourselves. May the spark of your servant, through whom you have revealed the world, shine and sparkle. May their merit, their ancestors' merit, and the merit of their innocence and their holiness stand for us, so as to prevent us from stumbling on these words.
their merit,
Are in the saying of Israel. Open my eyes that I may gain the Torah. May the words of my mouth and the thoughts of my heart be acceptable to you, my rock and my redeemer. For it is the eternal grant. It is from your mouth that knowledge and understanding issue forth.
na 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 On page 287. We're going to start at the indentation. We come now to that dramatic moment of the giving of the blessing. So it's Genesis 27, and the verse we have is only a little piece of it. Let me just find my page here. Right. So, Vayiki zaken Yitzchak vatichena einav meirov vayikra et Esav. And when Yitzchak became old, his eyes darkened from seeing, and he called Esav. And then we have the rest of it in the note, page number 223, the next verse. All right, who's going to read for us this evening, please? Yes, Beryl, there you go.
Rabbi Shimon said, "It is written, God called the light day, and the darkness he called night." This verse has been established and explained, but come and see. All actions of the Blessed Holy One are true entities, reflecting supernal mystery. All words of Torah are words of faith, supernal mysteries fittingly.
Okay. So Rabbi Shimon here is about to expound about this Isaac story, and he starts in another place, and the place that he starts is from the beginning of Bereshit, the beginning of the Torah, which we look forward to beginning again very soon. And the beginning of the Torah sets up that creation begins with God calling for light, and there was light. And then God calls the light day, and the darkness is called night. So the Zohar says, of course, you know all the midrashim, it's been explained. This is the standard nod that the Zohar makes to the earlier tradition. And then it says, but come and see, but we've got something new to look at. We have to look at something about it. And then we have a little introductory remark. So there's a lot of I don't know if everybody else is hearing it. I'm hearing a kind of an echoing a lot. If you could mute yourself, that probably would help for a while. And then when you want to speak, you can unmute, or if you have to read, then you can unmute. We have these two sentences. All actions of the Blessed Holy One are true entities. Geraldine, can you mute yourself, please? And I see you on two different screens.
Yeah, I don't know what.
I can't understand what you just said. There, thank you. So one is all actions, everything that that the Holy Blessed One does are true entities. So the word that the Zohar, let me just take a look here for a second. So these are Kolovdoi de Kutshabarichu Kulo Inon Milin Dikshot. So Milin Dikshot, the word Milin is davar. But of course, davar in Hebrew is related to both a thing and also a speeching, a talking, right? So the word is, is multivalent, right? And then it gets repeated, right? V'chol miloi de yoraita kulo milei mehem nuta. So the first one is that kol ovdoi, everything that God does, are milan dikshot, are things of truth. And then we get this new sentence that follows up that word milin, mili deoraita, the words of Torah, are words of faith, right? So we've been studying this for some time. This body of wisdom. Anybody want to give a little interpretation of what the Zohar might be indicating, trying to point out what Rabbi Shimon is trying to say? Larry, you got to unmute. That's the bargain here.
It seems to me that Yitzchak called Esau. So the question may be, why is he calling Esau and not calling Yaakov? And the Zohar is saying, well, when God called at the beginning, God called two things. One called day, and then the other thing called night. But it would seem that the Zohar is pointing out that when God does an action, like God calls, it's got to be, exactly right, but it's also got to be puzzling at the same time. So it's both true and puzzling. And then somehow this reflects on, why did Yitzhak call Esau? He must have, in other words, Yitzhak must have had a good reason to call Esau first, rather than calling who we would think and we call Yaakov first.
Okay,
Anyway,
so good. So I think you're on the right track. But I would, and if you could mute yourself again, that would be great. I wish we didn't have to do it this way. But I would prefer. I like to go slow. I like to go slower than that. So yes, we know that eventually we're going to get into the Isaac question, and of course that question, the Zohar didn't invent that question. It's a problem right there as soon as you read the story. But I want to take these statements first as just introductory general statements before we apply them. And you're right, eventually we'll have to see how this ends up connecting up and applying to Isaac's story. But what is, this is, as a catechism, so to speak, a set of propositions of truth that the Zohar or that Rabbi Shimon is trying to tell us. What's being conveyed to us about the way we understand God and Torah? Yeah, Craig.
I'm just thinking that he's saying how he called the light day, the darkness night, and it sounds like we're talking about two opposite things that may be opposed. But I see the word faith here, and we've been taught that refers to a unity. So even though to us they may seem opposite, somehow they're going to be connected to each other. It's all one.
Good. Another step forward. Good. Shkoach. So
may I take a stand?
Yeah, David. Yeah.
I'm going to guess that true is light and mystery is dark or night.
Okay, so you're seeing a parallelism between the light and the dark, and the truth and the mystery.
Yeah.
Is usually we think of the opposite of truth as falsehood.
But I can't argue with mystery being dark. I would start with mystery and go backwards rather than, I don't know.
All right, so good. Yeah, darkness for us definitely conveys this idea of murky, and you can't find your way, and it's literally unclear. Things are unclear. But I think that it's a good point to understand this verse that Rabbi Shimon is bringing out. Of course, classic, and as the Zohar says, we've looked at this many times. God creates the world, as I've said, and as you know, and then the Siddur, has quoted me very often. Baruch she'amar v'haya ha'olam. Right, blessed be the one who spoke, and the world came into being. Right, so and we had it only a little while ago. Was it last week, 2 weeks ago? We talked about speech coming out, about articulation being a way of thinking about God's unfolding. That God, the model of articulation of speech, is a good way to think about the thought, and then the sounds, and then becoming clearer and clearer. So back to the mystery part, that David would say, the thought and the sounds that haven't yet quite become articulated are not false. They're just, they have within them, meanings that haven't yet been plumbed or haven't yet become clear. But what God says here is that light is day and dark is night. God calls out these things, and God, by calling out these things, God makes these things. And God, therefore, has made night, day and night, light and dark. And these now, says Rabbi Shimon, coming back to the question with David, they're both true. Everything that God makes is truth. So that means that the dark is also true.
Yeah.
Right? It's all true. It's all solid. It's all exactly is because God said it. So it is. And then we go to this reflecting supernal mystery, right? Reflecting something that has issued out of the mystery of the divine, right? How night and dark, night and day, light and dark, issue out of the ineffable is a mystery, and yet it is, and it's true. And then we have all the words of the Torah are words of faith, supernal mysteries, fittingly. So faith, as Craig mentioned, faith in the Zohar has this idea of reaching across diversity, reaching across multiplicity, and embracing it all into the oneness. That's what Emunah means. That's what Mehemnuta conveys for the Zohar. That idea of encompassing and unifying. The words of the Torah, of course, are also the very verse that Rabbi Shimon starts with. That's the words of the Torah. Right? The words of the Torah are Rabbi Shimon's explanations. And the words of the Torah are, in a certain kind of parallelism, the words of the Holy Blessed One, because the Torah and the Holy Blessed One are one. Right? Yisrael ve'oraita v'kudsha b'richu chadhu. Right? They're all one, unified in the unity, the mystery of faith. So the supernal mysteries, plural, right, end up being the emanated articulations of one big supernal mystery. Right? The first line ends supernal mystery, single. And then we go into supernal mysteries that are many, and yet they all come back to the same root, and that's the faith. That's the words of faith. So the Torah is the Torah, right? It's the Torah itself, but it's also the living out of the words of the Torah through God. And to come back to Larry's point, the words of the Torah record words of Isaac. So the words of Isaac are now going to eventually have to be understood. And to bring up that question again, does Isaac know what he's doing? When Isaac does what he does, is it out of deception, or is it true? Or is it true despite the deception? So these are words of Torah, they are true. And they are all united into the mysteries fittingly, as is appropriate. As is appropriate. And when we say as is appropriate, the underlying implication is you may not think it's appropriate, it is appropriate. Right? You have to struggle, you have to stretch a little bit to find how it's appropriate. So let's see. Come and see. Back to Beryl.
Yeah, I just had to get unmuted. This verse has been established and explained, but come and see. All actions of the Blessed Holy One are true entities. I read this. Come and see.
Don't stop. Go ahead. You're reading it, and so continue reading it. It's good. It's good stuff.
Holy One are true entities reflecting supernal mystery. All words of Torah are words of faith, supernal mysteries, fittingly. Come and see. Isaac was not as virtuous as Abraham, whose eyes were neither blinded nor dimmed.
Okay, so one second, just for a second. So we have here the continuation of the verse, as we said before, is Isaac is old and his eyes are dimmed, darkened, right? The Zohar now says, let's think about Abraham. Did Abraham suffer in his old age from weakened sight? No, we have no record of that at all. So the way that Danny Matt translates it here, it's a statement. Isaac was not as virtuous as Abraham, whose eyes were neither blinded nor dimmed. Right? But Isaac suffered from dimmed eyesight, so you see that he wasn't quite as virtuous. Many of the traditional commentators don't read it that way. They read it as a question. Could it be that Isaac wasn't as virtuous as Abraham? And yet, Abraham's vision was not dimmed, and Isaac's was. So how do we understand that? Right? Because a lot of the traditional commentators will not like the idea of saying that Isaac wasn't as virtuous as Abraham. So either we read this as a kind of a rhetorical question, or Danny Matt chooses to read this as actually a proposition. Larry.
Well, maybe it goes back to sort of an underlying question, which is, did Isaac call Esau just because he was blind? And also in terms of light and day, light and darkness, or night and day, or day and night, just to get them in order. Isaac didn't have light, but yet he must have had light because he was Isaac. Anyway.
Let's hold on to our feet and see what happens. But back to you, Beryl.
But here is a supernal mystery, a mystery of faith. As has been said, for it is written, God called the light day. Abraham, light of day, whose light grows brighter and stronger in the ripening of day. So what is written? Abraham was old. Bayamim. Coming into days, into those luminous lights. As he aged, he grew brighter. Corresponding to what is said, shining ever brighter until full day. So God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. Isaac, who is darkness, proceeding to absorb night. So as he aged, what is written? When Isaac was old, His eyes were too dim to see. Certainly so. He had to grow dark, cleaving to darkness, his rung fittingly.
Okay. So now we see that there is, as it says here, the words of the Torah are words of faith, supernal mysteries. And here we have a mystery of faith. We combine the supernal mysteries phrase with the words of faith. And this is a mystery of faith. The words of the Torah. As we understand them now, we have to combine the various levels. God called the light day, and this is instantiated by Abraham. Abraham is day. Abraham is light. Abraham is the divine manifestation of flowing, ongoing light. Of course, the usual name that we give from the divine manifestations for Abraham is love, chesed. But it's the same thing. Right? This is this ongoing pouring forth of light that doesn't stop, right? And until something interposes itself in light's path, light just keeps on going forever and ever and ever. I think that this is a physics thing too, right? If somebody can help me out with that. And does anybody in physics now say that light doesn't go, just keep on going? Greg, what do you tell me?
As far as we know, the photons, just keep going and going and going.
Right. So that's light. So that's light is unstoppable on its own, is unstopping, right? And that's what chesed is. Chesed is infinitely outgoing. And that's Abraham. Abraham is chesed. So, and Isaac is night, because Isaac is the left-hand side. Isaac is the stopping of light, right? How do we get a shadow? There's something that interposes itself between the light rays and the next, surface that the light could have illuminated. And as a result, that surface, instead of being illuminated, is in darkness. So this is the idea of stopping, limiting, and enclosing, all of the things that are associated with din, gvura, pachad, right? Fear is darkness. Fear is about stopping things up. So Isaac is the manifestation of God's attribute of din, gvura, and choshech, darkness. So these are our two first patriarchs, and each one is a polar opposite of the other. Right? Each one is completely different, and yet the mystery of faith is that they are all equally representative of God, the one holy, blessed one. Right? They are both equally an articulation of God. So now look at what it says here. It says, God called the light day Abraham, light of the day, whose light grows brighter and stronger in the ripening of the day. So look at note 225, please. Beryl, it's on you.
Okie doke. Let me just find it. It's got to be on the wrong page. God called the light day, Abraham, light of day. Abraham symbolizes the flowing light of Hesed, first of the 7 lower Sifrot, the primal days of creation. Gradually, this light intensifies, radiating throughout the entire Sephirotic week.
Right. Sephiratic. Sephirah.
Sephirotic.
Right. So rhymes with erratic. So for the Zohar, the 7 days of creation are the 7 emanations of God's being into the articulated manifestations that we name as Chesed and Gvura and Tiferet and so on and so forth. And these are stages of God's unfolding. And the first of the apparent stages of God's unfolding, the 3 upper levels we can't talk about much. We talked about how much we can't talk about it, last week or 2 weeks ago, whenever it was. So here, that Chesed is a flow that will keep on flowing and flowing and flowing forever and ever, never stops, and it flows through and beyond each of the other articulations, right, and suffuses all of them, and eventually, of course, we have the world that we have. So Chesed is unending. And now what the Zohar says is that as Abraham got old, right, what is written? Abraham was old, ba bayamim, coming into days, into those luminous lights. So all of the days, the word days for the Zohar in the Torah signifies these stages of divine unfolding. And Abraham is going into all of those days. Abraham's chesed is going into all of those days and fulfilling itself in its generous giving. If it can't have any place to flow into, it's frustrated and it's defeated. The idea is that it's keeping on going. But what the Zohar is talking about, besides being on this divine level, it's also talking about Abraham. We've talked about this many times also. Abraham is chesed, but sometimes Abraham is Abraham. And what the Zohar is saying within the development of Abraham as Abraham is that as Abraham got older, Abraham became more and more and more Abraham. Abraham became much, more fully the embodiment of light, of chesed. So now that's all very nice, and that's all very beautiful. So he grows brighter and brighter. But then we get Isaac. And here the Zohar doesn't flinch from saying, and so correspondingly, as Isaac grows older, Isaac becomes more and more and more Isaac. And Isaac is darkness. And therefore, as Isaac grows old, that Isaac becomes encompassed, saturated, suffused with darkness, and his eyes no longer burn bright. His eyes are dimmed. His eyesight is dimmed because that's the opening to the light. So Isaac is blessed with attaining his full selfhood as Isaac. However, his full selfhood is darkness. So therefore, it's not that he is, that's why the traditional commentators say, it's not that he is less virtuous than Abraham. He is correspondingly just as complete in his life as his father. They're just two very, very different kinds of life. They're two very, very different manifestations of the divine. So therefore, when Isaac gets old, it's inevitable, since he is the purely righteous, totally devoted to God being that he is, that his godlike nature will flourish as darkness. He's fully dark by the time he gets old. Okay, any comments, any remarks about this? Yes, Beryl.
So fire is darkness?
Yes, that's
not
it.
light?
Right. So that's your when you start looking at all the different kinds of associations that are piled up and all of these different kinds of stations of God's manifestation. So if you look in the diagram, for instance, yeah, fire ends up being aligned with Isaac, while water is aligned with Abraham. So a water and light, that's not too bad. But that's the wave theory, so to speak, of light. Just a joke. Thank you, everyone, for rolling in the aisles. But you're right. When it comes to fire, isn't fire a source of light? After all, every Saturday night when we make Havdalah, we say, "Thank God, now we have the light. We have the light of the fire." So that's fire that's tamed. But we've got a fellow, a chaver from California, and all the fires in California are not brightening the skies; they're darkening the skies. Right. So fire is a tricky kind of thing, and of course, Gvura, Isaac is a tricky kind of force, right? The left-hand side is both constructive and also fearsome. So yes, it doesn't have a one-to-one kind of correspondence. These are multiple layers and aspects, facets of reality. Okay. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, Rabbi, is
Rich. Yeah.
Isaac being equated with Esau?
So we had that earlier.
Oh,
Right?
sorry.
No, don't be sorry. This is important because this is where all of this actually, comes into where everything crashes into each other. Right? We had it back a while when the Zohar wondered, what the heck is going on with Isaac? Why is Isaac, when we were reading the part about Esau and Isaac and Yaakov being born, and Yitzchak, Isaac loves Esau, and the Zohar says, what is going on here? And they talk about there is an affinity. It's a scary affinity. There is an affinity between Yitzchak and Esau. But back to that fire thing, if Yitzchak is divinity in that scary aspect, Esau is outside of divinity, right? But there's still definitely is a connection. Yes.
Because Esau is pure evil.
Esau is evil. Correct. Esau is evil.
So
Yes.
is it toned down with Isaac, or
It's controlled and it's marshaled, within godliness. And Esau is the force that Isaac has as in a godly way that's out of control. Right? It's the difference between a nuclear power plant or nuclear medicine and the bomb.
but in both cases it's not environmental. It's innate in both cases.
It's right. It's not because of any particular accident or circumstance. It is itself. Yes.
Thanks.
Yes. Hi. Okay. Next paragraph. Rabbi Elazar.
Rabbi Elazar, his son, came and kissed his hands. He said, "Fine, Abraham shines from the side of his rung. Isaac darkens from the side of his rung. But why of Jacob is it written, Israel's eyes were heavy from age?"
Old age. Please.
Sorry, Israel's eyes were heavy from old age.
Right. So we're going to get in a second to the question. Rabbi Elazar asks his father a question. What about the third patriarch? How do you figure that out? But before we get to that, we just have this wonderful little moment in the text. Because after all, what we're going to be struggling with, and actually not just with Isaac and Esau, this question of filiation, right? This question of being the son of the previous generation, of the previous patriarch. What's Isaac's relation to Abraham? What's Jacob's relation to Isaac? What's Esau's relationship to Isaac? But this whole question of when is there emanation and when does something go off the tracks. But what we do now here is we bring it right into the story of the Chevraya, of these, Kabbalists, because this is father and son again, right? Rabbi Elazar is his son, is Rashbi's son. So here we have a successful connection between a father and a son, and we have the coming and the kissing of the hands. If you look at note 229,
kissed his hands, a frequent sign of veneration and thanks among the companions of the Zohar.
So and then there's a whole slew of citations. That's of course absolutely true, but it misses the poignancy of it here, because after all, we know so well that the hands of Esav are going to be the way that Isaac will eventually be able to give over the blessing to Yaakov, right? Hakol kol Yaakov v'hayadayim yedei Esav, right? When Isaac says there's something here that's a little bit fishy, right? Because your voice sounds like you're Jacob, but thank God your hands feel like you're Esav. So I'm going to persuade myself that you're Esav. So the holding of the hands and the touching of the hands, it's true. There are so many other places in the Zohar where this happens, where there's not this association, but here there is. Here there's this extra little beautiful touch, literally, between the hands with the father and the son. So, yeah, Larry.
Well, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and his son were in the cave together.
Mm-hmm.
It been dark in the cave, and yet in the darkness they composed the Zohar. No.
So it wasn't dark in the cave. There was some kind of man, right? But you're right. The cave represents mystery. The cave represents the dark. What David was saying earlier, the darkness of mystery, for sure. That's the setup there. Yeah.
Then I was thinking, it was last week you said, or 2 weeks ago you said, I don't remember when, you said that water comes out, but you have to have a cup to contain it. So you think that the cup is a limitation and is bad, but actually the cup is part of God too, because it's a limitation. So although like on Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, we want not to have the din, but the din is important because otherwise there's no order in the world.
Right. So when the cup serves to be able to hold on to the water and then pour the water, then that's beautiful. That's a good thing. But when the cup is there to stop the water from flowing and prevent the thirsty person from getting the water because it's stopping the water from getting where it should get, then the cup is bad. Right? So that's the problem. Right? Is the limitation is the container there for the sake of serving to pour the water further, to direct the water, to give the water where it's most needed, or is the container to stop up the water and keep it away from the people that need the water? Okay, so now let's get to Rabbi Elazar's question. So Rabbi Elazar's question is, you made a very nice little dichotomy between Abraham doesn't go blind because he's light, and Yitzchak does go, his eyes are dimmed and darkened because he's dark. Very nice. But the problem is that it doesn't stop there. What about Yaakov? And Yaakov also has a problem at the end of his life. So does anybody want to clue us in? What's the situation? What's the scene where Yaakov's eyes are dimmed? Yeah, right. Larry, go ahead. What is?
when Yosef brings his two sons to be blessed, Yaakov is already blind. And
Right.
since he's blind, there's the question why he moves his hands like that and puts the right hand on ostensibly the wrong person. Although he says he knows I know what I'm doing. It's not that I'm not confused. I know exactly what I'm doing.
So here we have, right, very good, very good. So here we have a parallel, a real, good parallel of an aged patriarch about to dispense blessings. And in the case of Yaakov, he's also can't see what the heck is going on and who he's giving the blessings to, right? But as you started pointing out, there are major differences, right? But then the question is, so what's the role of the darkening of the eyes? What is the darkening of the eyes there for? If he still knows what he's doing, what's the function of that darkening of the eyes? And of course, from Elazar's question is why? Why is this righteous person suffering a darkening of the eyes? He's not Yitzchak. So Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, his father, explains. He replied,
precisely so. It is written, we're heavy, not we're dim. It is written from old age, not from his old age. Rather, from old age, from Isaac's old age. From that side they were heavy.
Okay, obviously. Why didn't we think of that? So the Zohar now makes these very fine distinctions, reading closely what the Zohar, what the Torah says. It says by Yitzchak, it says Vatichena einav, his eyes darkened. The Yaakov, it says Ve'inei Yaakov kvedot, and the eyes of Jacob were heavy. Right? Heavy is not the same as dark, says the Zohar. Number one. Number two, says Rashbi. Number two, it doesn't say Vayiki Zakein Yitzchak, when Yitzchak got old. It says Mizoken, from old age, right? From this abstract concept of being of old age. So the Zohar puts those together. Rashbi puts those together and says, no. Yaakov's situation is similar to Yitzchak's, but not completely identical. Let's just finish the last paragraph here.
He could not see properly, but they were not dim, whereas Isaac's were really dim, totally. So he turned into darkness, embraced by night, fulfilling the darkness he called night.
So Yitzchak does this beautiful self-actualization to become total darkness. Yaakov, on the other hand, is different. Yaakov, his destiny is to be the synthesis of Abraham and Yitzchak, a harmonious balancing of light and dark. But the harmonious balancing of light and dark means that dark is still there. So therefore, Isaac is still part of who he is. Right? The darkness of Isaac is there, but it's mitigated, or it's moderated, or it's mixed in with the light of Abraham. So the influence, literally, right, the flowing in of Isaac into Jacob has the effect of making his eyes heavier. The work of seeing is a harder work, but it's not the same thing as the blindness of Isaac. Whoop.
Hello?
Hi there.
Hi.
I think we lost the rabbi.
Yeah, oops, lost the whole thing now.
Well, it looks like that's about it for tonight. Hello? It broke. EXK, KDOS, HCZ. Huh, maybe the problem was my not loading.
Ay, ay, ay. Wow. I guess we lost it. A shame. Wanda, come up and watch her with me, because I can't go down.
The review process inside the White House was bastardized, ginned up, and falsified, specifically to try to fit John Bolton up with these criminal charges for something he didn't do. They want to
What? I can't hear you, so. Okay.
Today, nearly 500 senior military resigning from the manifested up for office, imploring people to go to work. And we have seen before lists of national security experts. We're getting used to that a little bit, but this is something a little bit different because on this particular day, there are 22 retired four-star military officers, including some who served quite richly under Donald Trump, including, for example, the General Trump himself appointed as Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the number 2 person in the Pentagon hierarchy. Air Force General Paul Silva only retired a year ago after serving under Trump. After being appointed Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff by Trump, he has now signed on to this letter saying, "Most Biden, Trump's a catastrophe." Same goes for the admiral who ran the Coast Guard under Donald Trump. Same goes for a vice admiral who led the Navy SEALs until he retired last year under Trump. And these officers are not doing this anonymously. They're putting their names on it, which is rare, right? For military officers in any case. But given that Michigan, Minnesota, Michigan, Minnesota, Wyoming, New Jersey, Vermont, Alabama, Mississippi. If you are freaked out about the integrity of your vote being counted, everybody's signing your vote. Figure out how you can get your vote in as early as you can. If you receive ballots in the mail and get your ballot in right away, immediately. Do it right away. All right. If you receive your ballot, fill it out and get it in right away. Do not delay. If you're going to vote in either early and or on election day, where do you vote? I'm going to get there. I'm going to say, and don't be afraid to overspend for this. You might get stuck in line. Even if you've never been stuck in line before, you might get stuck in line. Don't spend much time for it. It turns out there is no line. You can figure out a windfall. Little rounding error in your favor. Plan for there being a line. Plan for being a long line. Don't understand it. Don't make it something that costs other hands that all around it just to make you leave the line. You're stuck in the vote. We've seen long lines in person voting already. In Virginia, over the state, even in Fairfax County, where some people are showed up on mass. They voted the poll. Long lines there. Two lines. And it keeps turning out. People long lines in Hayes County, Illinois today. People waited 2.5 hours in line in Illinois today. Wherever you are going to vote, whether or not you have ever had a successful line before, there might be a line this year. Bring something to sit up. If you're going to be in line for a while, bring that map for yourself. Bring an extra map. Bring an extra map. Family, you have overcome it. In the face of never journey has no form. Adventure never ends because we are always on the way. Hello, how can I? Sore throat pain? Try to. And also the fact that we are going to see significant long-term injury. Around the age of 65 among African American Hispanic population, it's 35%, 35%. So this is robbing a generation of African American and Hispanic families of their mommies, their daddies, their brothers and sisters, and that's a story that has to be fun. And also the Trump's failed response to COVID-19 crashed our economy. Can't you tell this character? Biden is 2 weeks to be president, and he's not a smart person. First time, you'll want to watch with our we need to be trying to keep people from getting sick. Instead, you know,
Okay, good. I went backwards to see stuff. I went back to see the end of it. I couldn't wait to make
and I think we kind of focus on it.
you. What was so you got second, I think you actually flattened for a while. I don't think I knew that. I don't know if I knew it.
People in the country is getting 37 million. And I think we kind of focus on that death so often. But there are thousands and thousands of people who cleared their initial COVID infection but still battle the serious. You know, doctor, we focus on hospitalizations and the sort of healthcare capacity, and we focus on fatalities. And then there's some people who get this and it's not even that bad. But there's a big chunk of people who get real sick for a long time, and we that are strange and new that we're learning about what are we learning about the sort of long-term effects that they've shown us on folks who do survive. Well, thanks a lot for having me. I think before I answer, I just want to say thank you again for that last segment. Giving a face to this virus is so important because we're seeing how the White House is sort of dehumanizing it, taking away the humanity component of this virus. Social mindedness is really important. Look, we know that 200,000 Americans have perished in this epidemic. That really is the tip of the iceberg because this virus, the first thing, when we first saw it in Wuhan, China, in Europe, we thought of it primarily as a respiratory virus, not realizing that this virus affects the vasculature, the heart, and the brain. And we're seeing significant long-term disability because of this. Lung injury that's going out, people remaining short of breath, horrible acute heart injury, a lot of heart damage, vascular damage, stroke, pulmonary emboli, and then we're learning about long-term neurologic complications, sometimes referred to as brain fog, where people just are not at their best ever. They're always feeling this kind of cloud, unable to concentrate. And for individuals who depend on high intellectual levels of activity, it's devastating. And then terrible depression that we're seeing. A lot of neuropsychiatric disturbances. This is a horrible, horrible virus, and it's not rare. This is going to influence a generation of how we train medical residents, how we train young doctors, just like we did with HIV/AIDS back in the 80s. We're going to have to relearn medicine because of this virus. Wow. Wait, say more on that. I mean, I think it's widespread enough that the influence of the fact is noted, and I think in my head maybe I'll feel better. I've been putting them in a narrow category of like, yes, okay, there's some rare manifestations that are showing up. What you're saying is these kind of effects across different parts of the body that endure are not super rare. We're seeing them quite a bit. That's right. We don't have a good enumeration of this, and we also don't want to know how long it's going to last. Also, we're still pretty early into this epidemic. I was sitting in people who are experiencing brain fog or long-term cognitive deficits. Will they be back to 100% a year from now? Will they still have depression? Will they still have heart injury? These are some of these questions that we just don't know, but it's going to be really important to create on the figures that give medicine to follow long-term cardiac injury and look at the long-term consequences. And hopefully our National Institute of Health looks like it's getting ready now to support those kinds of long-term studies. And remember also, so many individuals who live in low-income neighborhoods don't have insurance. The cost of this is going to be enormous as well. This is going to have a huge impact on changing healthcare policy. So there's a profound policy implication here, right? Which is that if you think that these kinds of effects don't happen, and you can protect, say, long-term care facilities and seniors, people most at risk of fatality, you can say, well, look, it's spreads on college, and we can kind of eyeball everyone. But if these effects are, I mean, this means you want to stop people from getting sick. Like, he obviously wants people to not stop. You want to stop people from getting sick as a policy matter. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's two false narratives out there. One is only, this is an illness exclusively for people over the age of 80. Well, we've got 20% of people who perish from this virus are under the age of 65, and among African American Hispanic population, it's 35%. So this is robbing a generation of African American and Hispanic families of their mommies or daddies, their brothers and sisters, and that's the story that has and also the fact that we are going to see significant long-term injury. I think it's only beginning to really understand the full extent of Dr. Peter as always wonderful for site. Thank you very much. That is all. You mean beautiful. Thanks, sir. So I need to